Good morning, everybody. Happy Wednesday, although it feels like it's still Tuesday because I barely slept last night. But here we are, day after the election. Things a little bit more uncertain, but we have a lot more information than we can bring you from the last when we left you around 11:30 or 40 p.m. last night. What do we have today, Krystal?
What is time anyway, really? Okay, so we have a little bit of a different show plan today. Obviously, as you can tell, we're doing this live so that we can give you the most up-to-date results.
Yep.
We also have some great guests that we're going to post later on. We've got Chuck Rocha to talk about what happened with the Biden team and Latino outreach. Many of you probably already have some ideas of what he might say. We have John Nichols on, who is in Wisconsin. He did a great job for us last night, breaking down the industrial Midwestern vote. That is the area that this whole race is really coming down to. So we'll get his insights there from on the ground. We also have the panel on to talk bigger picture. What does this mean for these two parties? What lessons were learned? Where were the big misses? I think probably both of us are ready to be poll truthers at this point.
I am officially in unskew the polls now. I ridiculed them 2 days ago. From here on out, folks, well, I won't ever believe this.
And I mean, look, we'll give you exactly where things are at this point, but I do want to say, big picture, the polls, even if everything breaks towards Biden, which there are some indications that these last states are actually going to break towards Biden. It's a little bit of that red mirage effect. We're now counting the mail-in ballots, which are disproportionately for Biden. But even if that happens, these polls, which were supposedly fixed after 2016, were even more wrong.
So, Krystal, 17 points in Wisconsin. You remember that? ABC 17 points?
Yep.
It's this close. We're going to get to that. 12-point lead after 12-point lead, and those were supposed to be the moderate ones. Who remembers Jamie Harrison? Jamie Harrison lost to Lindsey Graham by 17 points. It was supposedly tied by Quinnipiac.
It was a toss-up.
He spent $100 million to lose by the exact same margin as a state senator who ran against Graham last time around and spent like $100 grand or something like that. $100 million. Susan Collins right now looks like she's doing great up in the state of Maine. She was a dead woman. That was Cory Gardner. Everyone's like, she's done. Gone. Kavanaugh destroyed her. All of that. Now, look, there is ranked choice voting, so I don't want to get too ahead of myself here. And Maine is a very complicated state. But as I understand it, things are looking good for her right there. Same thing on the Republican bloodbath in the Senate. It was a foregone conclusion. I mean, it was done. And yet, what can we say today? We don't actually yet know the results in the state of North Carolina. I think we should start there, just presidential and Senate. So let's throw that up there on the screen. First, let's start with the presidential. So the interesting thing there with the presidentials, we've got about 94% of the expected vote that is in currently. For Trump, that's 2.7 million votes, 50.09% of the vote. Biden is currently around 2.65 million with 48.69% of the vote. Now, a lot of the analysis that I have seen so far says that it's very unlikely that Joe Biden is going to be able to make up that deficit in the state of North Carolina. The needles were all very much, in Trump's direction. And
which, by the way, the needles last night were totally screwed up as well over at the New York Times.
I feel embarrassed for having relied on them and having to bring them to you.
They had Georgia at like 90% Trump at one point, and now they say it looks like it's going to be Biden.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so let's get to that, right? Which is that we went, left here around 11:40, whatever. All of a sudden, I checked my phone, the needle's back. And it's in blue for Georgia. So let's talk about Georgia. All right, let's throw that up there on the screen. So the margin there still looks better for Trump than it supposedly was supposed to last time around. I think it's like around the 50 mark. Yeah, there you go. You can see 2.38 million there versus Biden's 2.278 million. However, and I still think I might be one of the first people to have noted it, was remember Fulton County, where Atlanta is, as well as DeKalb County, which are suburban areas. The issue that they are going to have, Trump is going to have there, is it is trending and looking very good for Joe Biden there, just in terms of the breaking vote. And remember, Fulton County around 11 p.m. last night, Eastern time, was just like, yeah, we're kind of tired, so we're just going to go home and start counting again tomorrow, which, as one does in a razor-tight, thin election with the entire nation.
No big deal, guys. Don't worry about it.
After they already had burst pipes in the same room, which is just kind of incredible. So, look, it's still incredibly tight, but current indications look like Joe Biden is a slight favorite to win the state of Georgia.
You would rather, if we zoom out for a minute at the overall, here's the overall map and the picture, and the ones that are filled in, those are the states that have been called. You would rather be Joe Biden at this point than Donald Trump. The big reason why is twofold. Number one, Arizona. When we left here last night, Fox News had called Arizona. They were kind of out on a limb. There was a question about even they may retract it, et cetera. Now all of the major news organizations have called Arizona for Joe Biden. That gives him a little bit of wiggle room here with these other states, okay? So we talked to Reed Wilson about Arizona. That Maricopa County vote came in very strongly for Biden. They were better organized there than it seems in other states. So he has pulled off and won the state of Arizona. If we stay out west, we look right next door at Nevada. Now, this is one, look, it is razor thin right now. Biden came in with a lead based on the early votes that they had banked. He still has this narrow 8,000 vote lead. And based on John Ralston's analysis, great, analyst on the ground there, what remains to be counted is overwhelmingly Clark County. Very good for Democrats. This isn't in the bag for Joe Biden. Look, something could happen where it's more of a Republican vote there than there normally is. But if the trends remotely hold from what we've seen out of Clark County, Joe Biden will likely win Nevada. But again, we don't fully know. There's still some vote out there.
Tight.
We don't know exactly what's out there, but it looks like it's more of that Clark County vote. Okay. So did you want to... Thoughts on Nevada before I move on to the big
It's crazy,
state?
and you were correct. I actually, so once again, we're going to get to this later in the show. There's a lot of lessons to be learned. One of my immediate ones, the country is not nearly as doomer on COVID as I thought. And I think that they are far more amenable to Trump's reopen the economy message. And as you actually predicted here, if there was any state where it was going to come in for Nevada, whose economy has been decimated,
worst in the country,
then it was going to be Nevada. And everyone was saying, 6 points up. Even Ralston a couple days ago was like, I don't see how Trump could pull this out. Well, I mean, it certainly looks like it's pulling out. And I think the same thing is true in the state of Wisconsin. And that's this, look, we said it here ad nauseum how many times. It's intuitive and it makes sense, which is, there's a huge COVID spike. Trump and the administration hasn't done all that well with COVID. Yeah, well, Wisconsin is razor tight right now. Only 97% of the vote that was in. Last night, some crazy shenanigans. It was right in that 2-hour period where I decided to go to sleep. Apparently, there was a county clerk who had to walk the results, who would go back, ran out of printer paper, had to bring that all in.
Green Bay or something?
Yeah, I think it was somewhere in Green Bay. But essentially, where we're at right now, 1.63 million votes for Joe Biden, 1.61 votes for Donald Trump. As I understand it, again, very difficult for Trump in order to make up the deficit because all of the votes that are beginning to come in are from these more suburban counties with just massive margins for Democrats. And this is something that Nate Cohn over at the New York Times has been talking a lot about, which is that, guys, we need to adjust our expectations for the 2-to-1 split that you might expect. It could even be 3-to-1. In some cases, like in Michigan, which we'll talk about in a little bit, we're talking about 95-5 in Detroit, in Wayne County, right? Which is what Hillary basically won it by last time around. So we just need to adjust our expectations to what the possible is as these mail-in ballots are going to start rolling in from Wisconsin and Michigan and Pennsylvania. I would rather be Joe Biden in all 3 of those states right now.
That is correct, because of what we know is still outstanding. So let's take each of those in turn. In Wisconsin, as you said, there's still a number of urban and suburban areas out. Green Bay was out. Kenosha was out. And Joe Biden already has a small lead there. It's hard to see where there are large rural areas that Trump could make up the ground in the state of Wisconsin. If we move over to Michigan, similar deal. You have that. It's basically tied in Michigan right now. Let me just pull up what the latest numbers are there. Yeah, so very, very close. Biden was at a major deficit early in the counting process in Michigan. You can see as those early mail-in ballots are counted, he is closing the gap. And as you said, a significant portion of Wayne County is still out. So what is left in the state of Michigan appears to be overwhelmingly blue. So again, you would rather be Biden at this point in Michigan, even though, again, race much closer than what the polls might have indicated. Then you go down to Pennsylvania. This is the state that has the largest group of ballots still outstanding.
Yes.
So according to Nate Cohn at the New York Times, Trump right now leads Pennsylvania by about 700,000 votes, which is what you can see up there on the screen. However, there are more than 1.4 million uncounted absentee ballots that are overwhelmingly Democratic. They actually did an analysis there tracking what's left, and apparently what is left out is a little bit bluer than what has already even come in absentee ballot wise. So if trends hold, Biden will also be in a good position to win Pennsylvania. This one, though, to me is the most uncertain simply because there's so much of the vote still left outstanding to count. But look, if we just look big picture, okay, this has all felt incredibly crazy and hard to wrap your head around. And we have seen some shifts that nobody anticipated or expected. The bottom fell out for Democrats in Florida. Bottom fell out for Democrats with Latinos, which put states like Florida and Texas and others out of reach. However, what did we talk about here? This possibility of the red mirage, where it looks early on in the industrial Midwest that Donald Trump is doing very well, and that as the mail-in ballots come in, Joe Biden closes the gap and ultimately overtakes him. It's too early to say for sure that that is what is happening, but that appears to be what is happening. So you have this strange scenario where it kind of feels like a disaster for Democrats. They underperformed in a lot of ways. But ultimately, the map you laid out yesterday, which is Biden with a very comfortable electoral college victory over Donald Trump, that is like the most likely scenario right now that we're facing, given what we know about what's in these states and what is still to be counted in these states and the trends that we've seen within those states.
There would have to be a high level. There's a high level of uncertainty, so I don't want to start gloating yet, but I will eventually. And
I'll pat your back for you.
Yes, thank you. What's very interesting in my view is that if you look at where the remaining votes are going to come from, let's go over it again because this is really important. And the margins are so tight. Nevada, right? All the ballots left predominantly in Clark County, which are Democratic.
That's Las Vegas.
Right.
That's
so
Democratic.
There you go. And so Biden is up about 0.7 in Wisconsin. There's not a big chunk left for Trump anywhere in order to find some votes. I'm not saying it couldn't happen, but by and large, not looking great. So Biden is down by 0.5% in Michigan, but there's a lot of blue precincts that are left in order to report. And again, blue precincts are not reporting at a way that you might think, as in, oh, it's like 62-33. We're talking again like 90-10. Just because that's the way that the mail-in balloting is working, especially in Michigan and some of the more minority counties. Now, Pennsylvania and elsewhere is where it starts to get really interesting. As you said, whenever we take a look at Nate Cohn's analysis, which is that the absentee ballots breaking around 2-1 in Joe Biden's favor. Now, with the remaining number of votes, that would be approximately 800,000, which would put Joe Biden over the 700,000 or so deficit that he has right now. But again, we are talking about razor-tight margins, Krystal, and we were not promised that in every single one of these states. Which, again, I mean, Pennsylvania was what, +7? I mean, how many times did I say it here? Yeah, it was like, it's +7.
It was like around +5, 6,
Michigan was like +10, +11. I mean, Gretchen Whitmer, supposedly overwhelmingly popular. Wisconsin, it was you didn't even think about it. It's +17, ABC. Everyone was like, lol, it's obviously wrong. But how wrong is it? Obviously, somewhere in the middle. No, it doesn't look like that at all. I mean, it's caused me to significantly rethink many things. Number one was COVID. The American people are not nearly afraid of COVID as I thought. And number two, which is that they will forgive a lot in favor of their cultural agenda. Three, which is that Democrats clearly did not overperform amongst the minority voters that they needed to, and that suburban, college-educated white swing was not enough to save them. That's most evident in the results of the United States Senate.
Think about this. Only 1/3 of adults are college educated. 1/3.
I'm with you.
1/3. So if you have an electoral strategy that is just focused on 1/3 of the country, it's going to be hard to win a majority, let alone the sort of landslide victory that they wanted to have to really repudiate Trump here ultimately. I mean, I look at it a little bit differently. Basically, I don't think either of these guys really deserve to win, which is something we've been saying here for a long time.
Sure.
Either one of them could have had a landslide victory if they bothered to offer a real affirmative agenda and vision for the American people, and they didn't. Neither one of them did anything.
I completely agree with you.
Trump ran on nothing. To the extent he ran on anything, it was like deregulation, tax cuts. Biden ran on I'll wear a mask. And, today it looks like I'll wear a mask is going to be enough to squeak out,
but barely,
to squeak out a victory.
I mean, I thought it was big.
Yeah.
I really did.
Well,
and I was looking in Florida. People on the economy broke 85-15 for Trump.
That's
85-15. You can't make that up. I think the same thing is the case. Here's another one. In Ohio, Trump won the union vote, according to the New York Times exit poll. 56% of the union vote. That's not something that I think either of us predicted.
On the other hand, as much as I am happy to bag on Biden for what was a lackluster, pathetic campaign and a lackluster, pathetic result against a president who has been an absolute disaster, especially over the past few months, with his worst qualities always on display, and we haven't even gotten to the things that he said last night. Let's also keep in mind, we tend to set the bar so low for Trump. He's an incumbent president.
Yeah, he should.
And he's up against a guy in Joe Biden who's like a rotting husk of a person. I mean, he had nothing to say. He's not the man that he would. I know people don't want to hear this. This is not, about him having had a stutter. He's not the person that he was a few years ago. He's clearly, not at the apex of his powers, let's say. And so for Donald Trump, an incumbent president who for most of his presidency had the benefit of a very strong economy, to look like he's going to suffer a significant, if these trends continue, it is going to be a significant loss. It'll be the sort of reverse of his electoral college margin last time around, not to mention having lost the popular vote by millions of votes, 3 or 4 percentage points ultimately.
It's about what we predicted, actually.
So we have to say, this is a pathetic performance all the way around, but it's even more like ridiculously, absurdly bad for Donald Trump, who had everything there to turn this into a landslide victory and win all of these states that we're talking about today, no problem, no question, to run up a larger margin than he had last time around against, again, a candidate and a campaign that took everything for granted, was incredibly lackluster, incredibly arrogant about who they thought would just show up for them without them having to work hard or do anything whatsoever. So I'm not willing to say that the COVID piece ended up not being important, because honestly, I think if it weren't for the coronavirus response, I think it would be clear right now that Donald Trump had won re-election.
So I agree with everything you just said. And what I'm really looking at is the opportunities in the future. What are the trends, right? So this is what, you guys are going to hear me talk about this for the next couple of months probably, which is Trump won Zapata County in the Rio Grande Valley by 52-47. That is a county he lost to Clinton, 65-32. And get this, John Cornyn, who was running on the same ticket, lost that county by 10 points, which means that the 95% Hispanic district and very poor district on the Rio Grande Valley, sharing a border with Mexico, affirmatively chose Donald Trump as their president. You find me an analyst out there who would have predicted that.
Yeah.
Nobody would have thought that that's possible. Same with Mahone County. We talked about that was the one that was impacted by the Lordstown plant and GM. Well, guess what? Trump still won. He won the majority of union voters in the state of Ohio. So rhetoric alone has showed a pattern, which is the rhetoric plus this cultural politics has been overwhelmingly powerful. And it shows me exactly what you said. It didn't have to be this way. He could be cruising to a massive re-election. He basically governed like Mitt Romney and still almost won the Electoral College.
Well,
this close.
And here's the thing. When you had two campaigns that were basically about nothing, it came all down to culture.
Yeah.
That's what it came down to. And ultimately, Democrats have the upper hand when it comes to economics. Look no further than Florida, where there was a ballot initiative last night to lift the minimum wage to $15 an hour, and it won with 60-some% of the vote.
Won huge.
Not even close, right? Landslide victory for $15 minimum wage, and yet Joe Biden gets crushed, okay? So Democrats have to understand, if they want to win elections, what they need to lean into. Their economic positions on healthcare, on the economy, on wages, on unions are popular, but they didn't lean into that in this election, and they rarely do. Why? Because those are the positions that are most at odds with their donor base, and they have decided foolishly to go all in on this suburban, college-educated demographic. Well, guess what? Those people were going to be with you no matter what. No matter what you did, they were going to vote for anyone against Donald Trump. So what did they really need to do? They needed to build on the coalition. They needed to make sure some of those less frequent voters, like Latinos who, again, had a real affinity for Bernie Sanders for very specific bread and butter reasons, like the young voters who are looking at specific issues and policy positions, like the African American community, that, no, I'm sorry, just putting a black woman on the ticket is not going to be enough to win over black voters. That's another thing. Last night, Donald Trump way outperformed with African American men, which again is something that the Democratic Party is going to really have to reckon with. But you know what? They're not going to, because ultimately they won, is probably where things are headed. I don't want to get ahead of myself.
Anybody's grave yet.
But if they win, they're not going to learn any of these lessons. They're going to say, we won. That's that. Who cares? Water under the bridge. They need to look at the fact, though, of the erosion in the groups that you are talking about, because this trajectory of increasingly whittling down to this more and more affluent, more and more upscale, more and more college-educated group of voters is a losing strategy. Yeah. You are still, look, more people are going to college, that's great, but you are still a country where 2/3 of Americans do not have a 4-year college degree, and if you have nothing to say to them and you're not trying to win them over, you will lose.
Yeah, and God bless them. And you know, here's the really crazy part. Think about this. You're right. They're not going to learn their lesson, because here's what's going to happen. If the current trends continue, again, want to be clear, nothing official. Trump actually still could win, but a lot would have to go right for him in 4 different states, or in a couple of different states, and that seems relatively unlikely. So that's the framework of which we're talking. Anything could change. But right now, the dynamic looks to be if the Senate GOP is more likely than not to hold the Senate, right? And so that means that Joe Biden could be the next president of the United States. Well, a Senate GOP and Joe Biden means he's not passing anything. There ain't going to be no stimulus. There's not going to be no health care. There's not going to be nothing. Which means all that's going to happen is essentially what the Trump last 2 years were, which is cultural signaling via executive order. So you're going to go back into Paris. You're going to get some executive order, which is not even really binding on like the Equality Act or whatever. Like you're going to get some woke stuff in the Department of Justice. You're not going to get checks. You're certainly not going to get more. They're going to lean into that, because that's what their entire infrastructure is built around doing. Truth is, you can't basically do anything dramatically economical in this country without the U.S. Senate. Senate, I can tell you right now, not going to do anything for Joe. They're going to try and tank his presidency. And actually, there's a pretty good chance that would work. If Joe becomes president and McConnell is there in the Senate and he passes nothing and the economy tanks, 2022 midterms, goodbye the House for the Democrats.
Look, I saw a lot of takes that were like, oh, this is so bad for Joe that the Republicans are going to keep control of the Senate. And I would say the Senate is also undetermined, especially because of the 2 races down in Georgia. Democrats have about the same chance of taking the Senate as Donald Trump has of winning the election. Theoretically possible, but looking good for the Republicans at this point, given existing trends, okay? People are saying, oh, this is a very bad thing for Joe Biden. I disagree. He wasn't planning on doing anything anyway. This gives him an excuse. You can blame the Republicans. There's nothing Democrats love better than a great excuse for why they're so impotent and can't get anything done. Now he's got it, ready-made. I mean, I'm not joking. Like,
I know.
In the Joe Biden words, like, not a joke,
they're
right?
They're gonna make McConnell they're gonna make McConnell the villain again, and he won't care because he's just won re-election by a huge margin. He'll actually raise more money than ever. And look, I mean, I don't think this is a good thing for the country, by the way, but Susan Collins could be the next most powerful person in Washington. And this is the other worst part, which is that all of the areas where they agree are like the worst possible ones, right? Well, at least from my perspective. It's going to be like social liberalism. I'm sure they'll try and cut a deal on amnesty, and we'll have a nice long discussion about that whenever the time comes. But I think that in general, the way that it's all going to play out is kind of it's a very validating experience here, right? You see Trump completely realign the GOP and the electoral map. Joe Biden did not turn out the landslide that he thought. The media clowned themselves in ways we are not even beginning to understand the polling industry. Again, I do not know if I will ever trust one ever again.
Yep.
And in general, the country is obviously yearning for something. They're not getting it with either candidate.
I think
that's just that will always be the crazy part. But the reckoning comes. It will come, because the longer that it goes, all this mess, etc., you can't keep it away from people forever.
I think for me, the bottom line is that, first of all, if Trump had handled COVID reasonably well, just pretended to be cruising to re-election,
right.
No problem whatsoever. The second piece is, the realignment that is happening right now is real. It should be troubling for Democrats. I don't think it's going to be. But I also don't want to, I just don't think they're going to think that hard about it. I think they're going to go, oh, yay. Mm-hmm. If they win, yay, we won. Good. Mission accomplished. We're out of here. I mean, what did Joe Biden promise? He promised to beat Trump and wear a mask. And I think he's going to deliver ultimately on both of those promises. Seriously.
Yeah, I know.
Really. Yes. I mean, I think that's the way that it's going to go down. But yeah, I think bottom line, neither one of these candidates gave voters what they wanted. The fact that even with all of the chaos that has unfolded across the country and how unsettling that has been and how much there's been a yearning for progress, the fact that so many people with all of that endemic chaos still voted for the chaos agent of Donald Trump tells you a lot about how desperate so many millions of people in this country are for real fundamental change.
That is exactly right. It is the biggest middle finger to Washington that has ever existed. You'd love to see it, I gotta tell you.
It's a wild ride. All right, later on, friend of the show and former senior advisor to the Sanders campaign, Chuck Rocha. He's gonna talk to us about what the hell happened with the Latino vote and Joe Biden. We'll have that for you later this morning.